You want to speak to the Iranians, bomb them. Later you can start speaking, but before you bomb them, you can't even get their attention. First of all, bomb them. Then you can have a short ceasefire, but during the ceasefire, you have to continue to hurt them, because if you stop hurting them, you can't talk to them. Unless they're hurt, they're not even a partner for negotiations. If it's not very painful for them, you can't talk to them.
Right now, the world is watching a war with Iran. Missiles, strikes, retaliation, and on the surface, it looks like a familiar story. Power versus power. But what if that's not what this is at all? Because despite overwhelming military force from Israel and in the United States, Iran's regime is still standing, still active, still shaping the battlefield. So maybe the real question isn't who's winning. Maybe the question is, can this even be won? My guest today is Professor Dan Schueftan, one of Israel's leading strategic thinkers who has spent decades studying how conflicts in the Middle East actually work. The last time we spoke, he said something that stuck with me, that in this region, conflicts are not solved, they are managed. So now, watching everything that's happening, we have to ask, Professor Schueftan, does this war confirm your worldview or challenge it?
No, it confirms it very strongly, particularly when we come back to the question of victory that is discussed in a very shallow way. Who can once and for all score a victory and everybody then can ride its unicorn into the sunset? This is not how things work. And if you make it look as if this is what you're looking for, then of course people will be disappointed. You have barbarians in the Middle East. By the way, not only in the Middle East, but you have many barbarians in the Middle East. And the question that is at stake is, can civilized people force barbarians to stop using their barbarism, not once and for all, but again and again, so that civilized life can continue, not only in the Middle East, but anywhere? Because the number one weapon that the barbarians have are the limitations that civilized people impose on themselves. And we need to find a way to remain civilized as we are, as we want to be, and yet make it impossible for the barbarians to gain what they want. Actually, the difference is that we are trying to build something. We are a constructive society. We're trying to build a more free society, a more diverse culture, a stronger economy, better education, more advanced science, and so on. And the barbarians want to dominate, and they want to somehow compensate for their very justified inferiority complex because they have failed, and they are trying to dominate as much as they could so that they can gain some respect because they dominate. And what we have in the Middle East, and that's the big story, and you cannot understand any particular part of it without looking at the overall picture. Iran tried to hegemonize the Middle East. This regime has a jihadist, radical perspective, not only about the region, but about the world in general, trying to bring Islam again to domination beyond the Middle East, far beyond the Middle East, and this particular brand of Islam. And they've succeeded on the eve of October 7th to build a very impressive structure of, first of all, Iran itself, practically making everything in Iran subservient to this domination objective, building a lot of missile power that was designed to give protection, to give immunity to the nuclear power, namely so many missiles, far-reaching, heavy payloads, relatively accurate, covering the whole region and even reaching perhaps Europe and Diego Garcia. And under the protection of this ballistic system, they wanted to build an atomic deterrent, and the nuclear deterrent would give them absolute immunity for every action, and nobody will dare to touch them. Now, that's not a new thing. This is what the North Koreans have achieved, and this is what others wanted to achieve, the Syrians, the Iraqis. But what is unique about the Iranians is that they did not want it only for defensive objectives. I mean, the regime in North Korea doesn't really think that it can take over China and Japan, but they wanted to be in a position where nobody can touch the regime because of the immunity of nuclear weapons that they have. What the Iranians wanted is to hegemonize the Middle East, to control the energy of the Middle East. I mean, everything in the Persian Gulf, the Iraqi, the Irani, the Kuwaiti, the Saudi, the Bahraini, the Emirati, all the energy of the region. Also to take over Saudi Arabia and to be able, through their control in Mecca and Medina, to have an influence on almost 2 billion Muslims around the world, go beyond it into Arab and Muslim countries, and eventually far beyond the Middle East and North Africa. They wanted also to control Europe, and assuming, with some justification, that the Europeans will be eager to capitulate, as they have very often in their history, in their recent history, and are at the moment also on this trajectory. And they did it in a very sophisticated way so that Iran can build the power and the proxies will suffer the immediate consequences. So they can protect the Iranian nuclear and ballistic project by using Hezbollah with an enormous ballistic capability in Hezbollah and a ballistic capability, a very far-reaching ballistic capability in Yemen and controlling Syria and controlling Iraq. And they've already done a very large part of it. And they were on the verge of working in Jordan to subvert the regime in Jordan based on the very radical public opinion that you have in Jordan, primarily Palestinians and Muslim brothers. And they had a very strong position in the region. Now, what happened in the last 2.5 years is that Israel destroyed most of this position. It destroyed most of the power of Hamas. It is still there, but dramatically weaker, lost the overwhelming majority of its power. The same in Lebanon. Lebanon, instead of living under Hezbollah with a potential that Israel did not have a very good answer to, is no longer there as a major strategic threat. It is now a major nuisance. It's still a nuisance, but not a major strategic threat. The Syrian regime is not there anymore. The Iraqi militias are deterred. And the most important thing, Iran itself is demoted dramatically to a fifth-rate power. And after the last 40 days of war, a very, very weak country with only one weapon left, namely the ability to impact the price of oil and to threaten the Arab regimes in the Gulf. Now, what is happening now in the ceasefire, at least it seems as if this is happening. So far, what I've described is already established reality, established impact on the balance of power. Now we have a question. Who can last longer? Is Iran in a position to say, even in our very, very bad situation, we can still continue, and by continuing, by not going away, but by not collapsing, by not capitulating, win, because the West doesn't have the patience and President Trump is afraid of the ramifications inside the United States politically on the verge of the midterm elections and the oil prices and so on. Can we impose on the civilized world the will of the barbarians? This is exactly what pirates have been doing and barbarians have been doing throughout history. And the only way to deal with them is to crush them. Anything that they can agree to is by definition bad for civilized people. If they can feel good about themselves, I mean this regime, not Iran. Iran is a great civilization. The Iranian people is a very able and impressive people, and it is very similar to what we had when barbarians took over the German people 80 years ago, 90 years ago. Then they had the potential that the German people gave them. The Iranian people are very able, but the barbaric regime that is in power needs to be destroyed. Now, it may take a long time, it doesn't matter, but it must be on a trajectory of constant weakening, of constantly losing its position, of constantly losing the respect of other countries, of constantly being in a position where it cannot respond to its very vital needs. And the United States, so far, is doing the right thing. Namely, first of all, hitting them. This is, just a preamble. This is a precondition. You want to speak to the Iranians, bomb them. Later you can start speaking, but before you bomb them, you can't even get their attention. First of all, bomb them. Then you can have a short ceasefire. But during the ceasefire, you have to continue to hurt them, because if you stop hurting them, you can't talk to them. Unless they're hurt, they're not even a partner for negotiations. If it's not very painful for them, you can't talk to them. So the American blockade against the Iranian oil must be stronger than any Iranian response to it. This is the test that we are now facing. I think that at the moment, the damage that the American blockade causes to Iran is greater than the Iranian damage to American interests. And I stress here American interests. If the Chinese are hurt by it, great, I'm for it. Let the Chinese pressure the Iranians. If the Europeans are hurt by it, okay, the Europeans are not willing anyway to help in anything but capitulate to the Iranians. So if it hurts the Europeans very much and the Americans relatively little, the Americans can hold on to it for a while. Trump will not be popular in Europe, but I don't think that this is his objective. And now the choice to be presented to Iran is the following. And I hope that this is the choice that they will be presented with in the next few days. You either agree to something that you have sworn not to accept under any circumstances whatsoever, or even if we prolong the ceasefire will work against you, and there are certain things that you cannot do because we can escalate more than you can escalate. If the barbarians can escalate more than you, you're doomed, no matter what you do. If you prove to the barbarians that you can escalate beyond what they want, beyond what they can do, both in the intensity of your escalation and in the time that it takes, you need to have strategic patience. You need to be able to take it for a long period of time, not expect immediate total victory, but wait for the cumulative effect of what you're doing. If this is what Trump is doing, and my guess is that this is what he's doing, then America will come out on top, and also Israel. Now, the fact that Israel and the United States are so closely coordinated is tremendously important from an Israeli point of view. And even if it is uncomfortable in Lebanon in a minor, on a minor level, we have much bigger fish to fry. In Iran, we have a whale. In Lebanon, we have sardines. Compared to the real business of what's going on in Iran and the cooperation, the very close partnership with the United States, proving Israel as the most credible and able ally of the United States in this war is tremendously important from the Israeli point of view. So this is the question: who can escalate higher and longer? Now, if we get an agreement in a few days, great. I will be surprised, but if it's the kind of agreement that Trump said he wants, then it is something we can live with. But if there is no agreement and the ceasefire continues, the weaker the Iranian regime is, the better. The number one vulnerability of this regime is the economy. They can hardly run things as they are. The longer American sanctions continue, the more the terrible effect on Iran. If you add to it, in a war, the destruction of power plants and bridges, it adds to this pressure. And what you need here is not to leave before you're done. Now, when I say done, I don't mean ultimate victory, problem goes away, regime will fall immediately, and so on. Don't expect it. Israel is dealing with its barbaric, radical enemies for more than 100 years, and I assume that there will be enough radicals in this area to continue for the next 100 years. But most Arab states no longer make war with Israel since the end of the 1970s. Israel is now dramatically in a better situation than it was 2.5 years ago, because not only Egypt and Jordan and other Arab states realize that they cannot attack Israel and emerge victorious from it, but also the radicals are weakened. It doesn't mean that Israel will not be challenged. It doesn't mean that rockets will not be flying. It doesn't mean that radical Arabs will not try to kill Jews. This is what millions of them get up in the morning to do. This is what they are. This is not their policy. This is their essence. They have nothing productive in mind. They are not trying to build their own societies. They don't follow the example, the best example that you can see in the Arab world, in the UAE, where they really are trying to build a society and to build an economy and something. Throughout the Arab world, the overwhelming majority have failed to deal with the challenges of the 20th century, forget the 21st century. And public opinion is very radical in countries that have even signed peace treaties with Israel. So, will you still have people who will try to kill Jews? Yes. By the way, including Arabs in Europe, including radicals in Europe who support this attitude for anti-Semitism or for other reasons. But is Israel in a dramatically better position than before? Yes. Has the balance of power shifted dramatically in the Israeli direction? Yes. So we don't know exactly what will happen in the next days, weeks, and months, but we see the trajectory of 100 years not only maintaining itself in the last few years, but really strengthening dramatically in the last few years. So the trajectory of Israel, every decade being in a better position than the decade before it, in this decade, it will be catapulted. It has already been catapulted to a much higher position. Does that answer all the questions and problems? No. But is it better than ever before? Certainly yes.
Now, were you surprised by anything that Iran has done so far, firing on the Arab neighbors? Just the other day, firing on an Indian cargo ship in the Strait of Hormuz. Can we be surprised by anything that barbarians do? Did the U.S. and Israel underestimate what the response would be? And also, if you can comment on if Israel and the U.S.'s goals are aligned or they're different goals for the war.
Let me answer the last question because the answer to me is very simple. American and Israeli goals overlap for more than 75 years. I mean, since the establishment of the State of Israel, our goals overlapped because Israel and the United States were always fighting radicals in the Middle East. Unfortunately, Americans did not realize how much American and Israeli goals overlapped. And for a very long time, a very simple-minded American approach was Arabs and Israelis don't get along with each other. We have to choose between Arabs and Israelis. There are more Arabs than Israelis. There's more oil on the Arab side than, I don't know, matzah knedlach on the Israeli side. So our bread is buttered on the Arab side. Let's not enrage the Arabs. And a lot of people wanted to support the Arabs. It took America a long time because Americans have a difficulty in understanding anything in the world where culture is involved. It took them a very long time to understand that actually the United States, Israel, and most Arabs are on the same side against the Arab radicals. And the radicals are against America and Israel. And it's no wonder they're burning American and Israeli flags together. And it's no wonder that in Iran, they shout against the big Satan America and the small Satan Israel. But this was true also in the 50s and 60s when the Americans didn't recognize it. Under Eisenhower, under Kennedy, the first to start it, to understand it was Johnson. And the best understanding came with Nixon and Kissinger. And since then, things are developing. Now, sometimes Americans become again stupid. And this is, for instance, Jimmy Carter before Sadat forced him to change his policy. Or they want to capitulate because they believe in American weakness, like Barack Obama and to a lesser extent, Joe Biden. But systematically, American and Israeli objectives overlap. They're not identical, but they overlap. And the United States is prevented from doing certain things because it's a great power, but a small country can do things that a great power cannot do, strange as this sounds. So the United States could use Israel as its local Rottweiler, because when Israel is doing what Israel needs to do for Israel, it is helping the United States in most cases. Now, can there be a tension between the two? Of course. Is anybody 100% aligned with the other? I mean, look at the discussions between Britain and the United States in the Second World War. There is always, between allies, there are tensions, but there is an overwhelming overlap, and I think that now it is greater than ever before. Concerning surprises, the one thing that surprised me was Iranian stupidity. I am used to sophisticated Iranians, unlike Arabs, that have strategic patience. So when the Iranians attacked Israel in April 24, I was surprised at their supreme stupidity. Why would you do it? You built Hezbollah and Hamas so that the war does not come to Tehran. Why do you give Israel not only an excuse, but a need to attack you? Okay? Now, Biden can stop Israel from going too far in April, so they become stupid again in October 24. And again, it is Biden, and the response is limited. But then you have Israel dealing very, very effectively with Hezbollah, which opens the way, and the Syrian regime collapses, and Trump becomes president, so Israel can do the 12 days war in 2025. What is happening now doesn't surprise me, because in Iran, the people who know how to cheat, we kill them. The so-called moderates, okay? We kill the people who can cheat, which is a very good thing. The more radical they are, the better. They make more mistakes. They don't allow others, particularly the United States, to cheat itself. And making it difficult for the Americans to cheat themselves is something that is enormously good, enormously positive from an Israeli point of view. So what surprised me was the initial Iranian stupidity. I'm no longer surprised with the Iranian stupidity, because now the stupid steps that Iran is taking is because the smartest liars are killed, are dead. I'm delighted to say we killed them. And we have the idiots of the guard, of the Revolutionary Guard, who can be very effective in killing people or building missiles or burying them deep in sea. But when they need to cheat Americans, they're not very good in cheating. So I think it is better, and I'm not surprised that they make stupid mistakes.
But do you think that Iran has more leverage than people think with their control of the Strait of Hormuz and the global economy?
Whatever leverage they have, you need to demonstrate that the United States has more leverage. Because once they have more leverage, the result, they have unlimited ambitions. It is not that you give them something and then they're relaxed. No. This is exactly what Americans cannot understand. Americans, I don't know, it's the water or the air in America that makes it impossible for Americans to understand what radicals are. They believe that everybody can be persuaded to become an American if you just give him a chance. I already use this very often, perhaps even on your podcast. Americans believe that in every Saddam Hussein there is a small Thomas Jefferson trying to come out, only he had a difficult childhood, and give him an opportunity. No, they're barbarians. They are barbarians through and through. They're 24-karat barbarians. They're nothing but barbarians. Now, can barbarians be also sophisticated? Yes. Can they be pragmatic? Yes. Every barbarian is also pragmatic. Hitler was barbaric in Munich in 1938. When he sees Chamberlain, why not be so-called pragmatic? Okay? And Americans' inborn stupidity is that if you see somebody who is pragmatic in the limited sense, they believe that he is pragmatic in his overall attitude. Barbarians remain barbarians. Okay? You cannot change Yasser Arafat or Ayatollah Khomeini or Assad or Gaddafi, or these people are completely committed to a destructive system that doesn't care about their own population. Now, there are different levels. The worst are the Palestinians, because they're also irresponsible. So in Syria, Assad was a barbarian who knew when not to do certain things because he will be defeated. The Palestinians, even if they know that they're defeated, they know that dumb people around the world who will give them billions of dollars every time they are barbaric, and they will speak about their humanitarian needs, and they will assume that if you give them humanitarian aid, they will become non-barbaric. And therefore, people have the fantasy about the Gaza Strip, where it will become a Riviera, or you will de-radicalize them. You really need to be completely separate from reality to believe that you can do it. So I think that when you look at the Middle East, you need to make the distinction between the responsible leadership in most Arab states, irresponsible public opinion, but responsible leadership in most of the Arab states. You can work with most Arab states. You must hit the radicals as hard as you can and humiliate them, because the only way moderates can explain to their own people why they're being moderates is to show how radicals suffer. If radicals don't suffer, you can't defend moderation to your own public opinion. So crushing radicals, hurting radicals, and more important than anything else, humiliating radicals is the best way to promote moderation and responsibility in the Middle East.
Why is it that other countries have not joined in this war with the US and Israel? Is the world afraid of Iran? The rest of the world?
First of all, there is no world. Okay, there is no such thing. I mean, people invented this concept of the international community. You have to have a very developed sense of humor to believe that there is such a thing, or some kind of global solidarity, universal solidarity. That's very nice. I mean, you can say it in universities where, professor at universities can say things with impunity in their classrooms, and nobody ever confronts them with reality. They can give them any blah blah that students will be happy with. So you don't have a world, and the United States does not expect the support of the world. What? Cuba will support America, North Korea will support America, Venezuela? No, but you speak about NATO. Basically, this is what you speak about, NATO countries. And NATO countries believe in being weak. And even if they would have wanted to be strong, they have nothing to be strong with. They don't have armies that are really ready for war. And more than that, they don't have a population that is willing to support it. They're not even having people who are willing to defend their own country. They live in La La Land in spite of the war in the Ukraine, where they know they can give money and arms, but they don't have to fight. Okay? People who are unwilling to defend themselves will suffer the consequences. We as Jews have learned it. Zionism is, among other things, the product of the understanding that Jews who cannot defend themselves are doomed. And therefore, I think that ultra-Orthodox Jews are doing something un-Jewish when they're not willing to join the army, when they live a parasitic life in Israel, only weakening the Jewish people. So I think that we have learned it the hard way in thousands of years of history, and what we suffered because we were unwilling to defend ourselves. The Europeans lived under the illusion that they don't have to defend themselves because the Americans will come and fight for them. And all they said to the Americans were how unhappy they are that the Americans are willing to fight, because they were not willing to fight and they expected Americans to fight instead of them. I think they are waking up now. Trump is helping them to wake up by saying, we will help you help yourself, but we will not do it instead of you. And they're willing, after America gets everything for them in the Gulf, then they want to be the guardians of it. Very nice of them. Okay? Somebody will do what the Chancellor of Germany correctly called Dreckarbeit, namely the hard lifting, okay, the dirty work. The Americans will do that for them, and then they will come in nobly and they will secure things as long as they don't have to defend themselves, as long as they don't have to do anything, as long as they don't have to take any risks, as long as they don't have to call on their people to defend their country and their way of life and their civilization. And they believe that impotence is let me put it this way, the meek will inherit the earth at the end of time, okay? But being meek doesn't mean that you can effectively function in this world if somebody else is not willing to shed his blood for your unwillingness to defend yourself. So what do you expect of them? I wouldn't have expected anything of them. By the way, interestingly enough, the Secretary General of NATO actually justified a large part of the argumentation of Trump vis-a-vis NATO. Okay? Because you needed to threaten them to even make them spend money on their own defense, let alone the inability to convince your own people to defend their own country. So lower your expectations.
I'm also referring to the Arab countries that were attacked by Iran, for example, Saudi Arabia. Why have they sat, quietly being
Look,
attacked?
first of all, they're frightened. Second, the United States under Obama and Biden proved that it is not willing to defend them. And third, they did not have this wake-up call that you get only when you're being bombed. By the way, Israel also, until the 7th of October, did not understand that it must stop containment and start to work in a way that is preventive rather than reactive. And remember, these are not great military powers. They have a lot of aircrafts and very sophisticated aircraft, which doesn't make you a military power. You know, the United States speaks about the two strongest air forces in the world, the American and the Israeli, and they know what they're talking about. There's a difference between people who have a lot of aircraft and a strong air force. And also the Europeans have a lot of aircrafts, okay? But I would not have expected the countries in the Gulf to do it. And by the way, if God forbid we were in their position, I'm not sure I would advocate it. But now, if Trump sticks with it, and particularly if the Iranian regime falls, I think that they will find a new courage. And again, the most impressive country in this region is the UAE.
Now, let's say the Islamic regime survives this war, even after everything that they went through. Did we actually accomplish anything with this?
Oh, yes. Yes. We have accomplished a dramatic weakening of our worst enemies. Yes. This simple-minded child, I mean, I like children, but not when they're 45 and 54. Okay? But this childish idea that unless you get total victory, you have achieved nothing, it is a stupid approach to life. I mean, with that, you can become a journalist, okay, but not a strategist. This is really, you must be stupid, ignorant, and completely unaware of human history to think in these terms. if the Iranian regime, from being feared and respected in the whole region, is now being treated as a negative element, but as a weak negative element, okay? Can it still create trouble for you? Yes. Can it still hurt you? Yes. But can it dominate the region? No. Particularly if we don't let them rebuild it by sanctions. Whatever is bad for Iran is good for the Middle East at the moment. Will the Iranian population suffer from some of it? Yes. The Japanese population suffered in the Second World War, the German population, and not everybody was a Nazi in Germany. But burning German cities was a good idea. I'm not suggesting now we have to burn Tehran, but I'm saying even if Iranians will suffer, and they are suffering, okay? But the only way to alleviate the suffering is more suffering. And this is the paradox of war. I mean, after all, we are threatening the lives of our children so that our children will have their lives less threatened in the future. If you live in Israel, okay, and you really want to defend yourself.
Now, why do you think it is that there are increasing amount of people that say that, Israel dragged America into this war? You have people on the right.
Look,
that
most
are,
people are stupid. I mean, not just, most journalists or most academics, but most people are stupid. And when you give them a simple answer to a complex problem, they will usually buy it. And first, the journalists buy it, okay? The shallow, irresponsible perception in the world about everything that's going on is the product of the fact that journalism underwent very bad prostitution in recent decades. Journalists no longer even try to give you a fair picture of what they are reporting about. They have their own views to promote. They have ideological commitments that they are working for. And you can trust journalists today less than ever before. Ever before, you could. Today, most of the media in Israel, as well as in other places, are just places where they're trying to sell you a product. And you should trust the journalist less than a used car salesman. He is constantly trying to cheat you, among other things, because he himself is simple-minded, very often, not always, but very often. Also because he cannot sell something complicated, so he sells you something simple. He's lazy. He's not even trying to study anything. He's afraid that he will be accused of racism, so he will not bring a culture into his analysis. And when he brings it, he will bring it in a politically correct way so that his colleagues will not say things about him. And when you don't understand culture, you don't understand the most important ingredient of human behavior, of motivation for human behavior. And when you have somebody as ridiculous as Kamala Harris saying this in such a shallow, ridiculous way, first of all, how did she become vice president? Second, how did she become to represent the Democratic Party? I think it is a shame on the Democratic Party historically. And then that she also subscribes to it. And unsurprisingly, the radical left and the radical right joined the same anti-Semitic idea of Jews controlling the world and Jews killing babies and the blood libel and so on. So if you live in Europe or in the United States as a Jew, you should know that the days of Jewish life in the United States are as numbered as in Europe. I mean, in Europe, it doesn't exist anymore. And in the United States, you have another generation, perhaps, of it. So be prepared to hear preposterous things, because simple-minded people who get profoundly distorted information by everything around them will come up with ridiculous conclusions.
But do you think that they're all ignorant, or some of them are being paid off? Like Tucker Carlson, for example, he
I
says that.
don't know, and I don't care. The motivation, I'm simply not interested in the motivation. I know that Tucker Carlson is an anti-Semite. Is he a paid anti-Semite or not? Who cares? Okay? I assume he's also paid, but who cares? I'm not really interested. And by the way, if I have an anti-Semitic journalist who nevertheless gives me honest reporting, I would buy the honest reporting regardless of the personality of the journalist. Okay? So, yes, anti-Semitism is an important thing, but if in order to be a bona fide progressive, you need to be anti-Semitic, like the New York Times, always selling the product of Jews kill babies, Jews kill children. This is essentially what the New York Times is doing, not only in this war, for years. Okay? Then, if the motivation of the New York Times is anti-Semitic or not, I don't know. I don't care. I know what the product is.
I mean, you have people saying, for example, that Sharia law is good, Islam is good.
Let me interrupt you here. You have people saying practically everything. And most of what people are saying, I'm not interested in. Okay? Because you will always have people saying the dumbest things and sometimes smart things. Okay? So if you want to quote something smart or interesting or something that could be true, I'll be delighted to discuss it. But let's not, be impressed too much by what people are saying. You know what? Rapists are saying that if they only could get love in a legitimate way, they wouldn't be rapists. And I'm interested in it? No.
What about the future of Gaza and Hamas? I mean, we've been
Oh,
seeing.
it's very clear. In the next generation or two, I don't know what will happen in 200 years, but in the next generation or two, we will have a hostile, violent Gaza attacking Israel. If Israel will do the right thing and constantly hit Hamas in Gaza, then the impact of these attacks will be marginal, hopefully negligible. If we will again believe that we can, convince them to be anything else than what they are, then they will hit us much harder, like they did on the 7th of October. If we are dumb enough to go back to the stupidity before the 7th of October, we will get again the 7th of October.
Do you
And if
think?
somebody believes that in Gaza you will have a Riviera, okay, then I think he should get a prize for his sense of humor.
Now, do you think that Israel has learned its lesson not to fall asleep at the wheel? No matter
Yes, it
who's elected.
learned its lesson, and then it will forget its lesson. It's learned its lesson in 21 and forgot it in 29. It's learned its lesson in 29 and forgot it in 36, 39. It learned its lesson in 36, 39 and forgot it in 47. We learned the lesson in the Second Intifada and forgot it on the eve of every generation knew stupid Jews don't believe the anti-Semites that tell you the Jews are a smart people. Just look at our Knesset and you will realize that you can also have Jewish idiots.
Okay, Professor
On
Schueftan,
this happy note, right?
on this happy note, if you want to leave us with a final message,
No, I've given you the final message constantly, namely, as long as we don't cheat ourselves, as long as we continue to combine being Sparta against our worst enemies, but constantly maintaining Athens inside. You must be soft when you can and harsh when you don't have any other choice. This is our challenge. Our challenge is to be open and pluralistic and liberal when we can towards anybody who deserves it, and very harsh with the barbarians, and to identify what the barbarians are and what they're trying to do to us.
Thank you again, Professor Schueftan. I appreciate your time, and I hope to speak to you again in the future.
Thank you.